Did you get those people on your TikTok page? Anyway, hello, welcome back to Sparkles and Sunsets, a Twilight fan podcast where we go chapter by chapter through the different Twilight books and we dissect them and comment on the different things within the book and look at them with a fully formed cortex. I am now 30, reading the books for the first time in over 10 years, and I'm really excited. Hate the cover. The chapter that we're going to be covering today is from Twilight, and we are on chapter 2. We're just getting started, and the chapter is called Open Book. So I have various highlights and notes that I would like to get into throughout the book, but we're going to go in chronological order like we did last time. A lot of this particular chapter it takes place, I believe, over 2 days. And the first day is just Bella pining for Edward. Even though Edward was so mean to her, she can't stop thinking about him. And so for the first chunk of this chapter, he's not in school, and it has her heartbroken. She's known this boy. She doesn't know this boy. And she's hung up on him. So let's get into that. We already have both Mike and Eric fighting over Bella's affections, and Bella just kind of sees them as clown boys and is not interested. She refers to, I believe, Eric at multiple points as a golden retriever. And this book briefly has the scene in the movie where they hit somebody in the back of the head with a volleyball, but it's so brief and it's a sentence, but I did highlight it because I want to discuss it. I hit my teammate in the back of the head with it. And it was worse because Edward Cullen wasn't in school at all. That's the whole thing. Like, they really drug that part out in the show, I felt like. But it's basically her being like, where's Edward? Like, the worst part isn't that I'm so, and she talks about how she's so embarrassed and she's walking around school with like flushed cheeks, and but Edward's not there. The boy that made me cry in my truck yesterday is not at school today. And then she proceeds to say that she wants to confront him and demand to know what his problem is. Again, she's new to this school. She's known these people like less than one day. Like, maybe Edward was just having like an off day. She has literally no idea or like nothing to like. I'm not saying Edward wasn't being a jerk, because he absolutely would. He absolutely was. But this was wild. And at multiple points in the cafeteria, she keeps looking for him. She keeps checking the table that all of the Cullens sit at. She keeps scanning the lunchroom, wondering where the mean boy Edward is. And Edward's gone, but she sees that his 4 siblings of sorts were sitting together at the same table, but he was not with them. And then she's like, middle of the day, she's like, maybe he just like missed the early part of the day and he's going to be back. He's totally going to be here for school. And he didn't come. And as time passed, I grew more and more tense. Like, she is like, where is this man? He made me cry. I want to confront him, but mostly I kind of want to kiss him. That's like the vibes I'm getting. Like, she's already infatuated with this boy man. So the entire day that Edward is gone, Mike dutifully takes care of her. He specifically, it's quoted in the book saying, Mike, who was taking on the qualities of a golden retriever, walking faithfully by my side to class. I held my breath at the door, but Edward Cullen wasn't there either. And like, these boys are starting to creep me out. They're like lingering around her desk. They're like walking her to class. They're getting upset that the other one's talking. And it's like, they barely know this girl either. And like, it's clear that they're not just being nice. And then she finally gets to science class where she thought she was super stinky, and she somehow is now relieved that the desk was empty and Edward was gone. Which, in all fairness, maybe she's like, ooh, maybe he is kind of hot. But then she remembered the stinky day and was like, oh, I don't want a repeat of the stinky day. So maybe it's a good thing that he's not there. Another pin in Bella being a parentified child. Charlie can't cook foods. And so as Bella moves in, she's kind of discovers this and is like, okay, like, I gotta start taking over and cooking things. And she's not making like crazy different things or like super special things. She makes him at some point like steak and potatoes, but she's cooking all of the meals for Charlie. And not only is she cooking the meals for Charlie, she's doing the grocery shopping for Charlie. So she's throwing Charlie's and her dinner in the oven and goes to check her computer, and she has multiple emails from Renee. And to further prove that Renee was also parentifying Bella, within the first email that she sent wasn't just like, I love you, I miss you. There's a point where she's like, I can't find my pink blouse. Do you know where my pink blouse is? And Bella's like, you're supposed to pick it up from the dry cleaners on Friday, Mom. Like, don't you remember? And she's replying to these emails while everything's cooking and then having to run back to finish cooking. So she's like telling her mom, like, go pick up your shirt from the dry cleaner. Oh, and dinner. Girl. Charlie is at the least grateful for Bella taking the role and cooking things. She seems to take great comfort in the dinners are just had in silence. And I can't figure out how, like, where that's coming from, if it's just their personalities naturally meshing together and she's more like Charlie than Renee, if it's years of awkwardness or what. But there's like multiple points where she points out where she's just there and he's just there and they're just coexisting within each other's space, which is great, and a lot of people like that. And this is another point I have for, like, I believe Bella is autistic. I think Bella would love parallel play, and I think that she likes to do things with people but not necessarily actively like in the same space, but she would like to be doing her own thing. My favorite part of the beginning of this book, and I remember this clear back to when I was a teenager, and Bella basically asks about the Cullens, and Charlie's like,
Carlisle Cullen, the super handsome doctor? Yeah, I know him.
but he goes on like a several page rant about the Cullens and how fabulous they are and how good looking Carlisle is and how well behaved the children are and how lucky the town is to have him, because he could go anywhere else in the world and make all this money, but no.
He stays and he's just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
And did I
I mentioned that he's super hot and that all the nurses think he's super hot. He's super hot, right?
And she notes it was the longest speech I ever heard Charlie make when he's going on about the Cullens and Carlisle and the children. He's very passionate. And so I'm wondering if like that's the general feeling about Carlisle in the community, is that he's just very well respected. I was watching, is it New Moon, where Carlisle has to go to the reservation to take care of Jacob, and he seems to just, everybody seems to respect him even though he's a vampire and he's on their land and things like that. Like, but it seems like Charlie's very passionate about Carlisle and the Cullens family. And Charlie himself says,
You should see the doctor, Charlie said, laughing. It's a good thing he's happily married.
I'm like, ooh, and he does again proceed to talk about the nurses, but he does say it's a good thing he's happily married. Okay, Charlie. Without looking, I already know that, like, on a side of our own, there's so many Charlie and Carlisle fan fictions. It takes us up to the first week past of her and Forks. She likes it just because it's basically been uneventful. I bet you living with Renee is like living with an explosive firework. Like, it could be really chill for a second, but you're almost on edge for whenever something's going to kind of go haywire with her, I feel. Bella being parentified, she cleans the house, and then she's just by herself and drives to the library on Saturday, checks out the books, and is like, these books suck. And it's like, I gotta go to a bookstore. And like, reading this makes a little bit more sense why, like, in the movie she was so pressed about going to like a physical bookstore. Like, she didn't order it online or anything, she had to go to this one random bookstore instead of just like ordering this book online. Maybe it's like something that, I don't know, I'm sure they'll talk about that towards the end of this. Like I said, this is the first time I'm reading this book in years, and this is the first time I'm dissecting it like this. And so she makes a note that she's going to have to go to another bookstore, or she's going to have to go to like Olympia or Seattle, find a good bookstore, bring them home. And I can relate. Like my library here, I'm ever grateful for them. I use their digital services more than anything. Their kids' library is very nice, but overall, it's not very organized. It doesn't have a lot of things. If they do have books, they're like incomplete editions of them. Like they might have three, and then you'll look it up on the library to see if any of the connected libraries have them, and they don't. It's bizarre, and they don't meter them back and forth. I don't think. I don't know what to make of this library, but I do utilize the digital services. I want to note that apparently Bella has never seen snow before. And so she's outside with Mike, and Mike says to her, "Have you ever seen snowfall before?" "Sure, I have." I paused. "On TV." So Forks is so new to her in so many different ways. The boys, the attention, the parenting style, snow. Like Bella has uprooted her whole life. So another day passes. She goes to lunch with and sits with her friends Jessica, Mike Newton, etc. And again, she's like, well, maybe Edward's there. And like, I will go to biology today if I look, or if I like peek over there and he's not glaring at me. And so she like peeks over there and he's not looking at her. And so she keeps peeking at him, and she's sitting there with Jessica. And Jessica's such a loudmouth. And Jessica turns to him and is like, why are you staring at Edward? And you know, Edward probably like heard her thought before and was like, so Edward, like, you know, like there's this video where somebody like videoed Elon Musk from the TV and they're like, oh, he looked at me. But it's like when they like are like facing away from the camera and they're like, that's all I'm imagining happened. And like my heart would sink and be like, oh, like, how did you know? We weren't talking that loud. But it's like big mouth Jessica. She's like, yeah, look. And she's like giggling the whole time, like, ee. I feel like we all had that friend. I don't know. Jessica feels very real to me. But she finds that like they don't look upset and that they're all giggling. So she's like, maybe I will go to biology. And then she's looking at Edward and she's like, something's different about that boy. And she notices, remember in the last podcast we talked about the bruising under the eyes, like he just looks a little bit healthier. The bruising's gone. His eyes are a much brighter shade of an almost honey color, and she'll make references to that multiple points, like your eyes are different. And when it comes to the point where she meets him again in the lab, she makes that point to him, like, are you wearing contacts? Like, your eyes look very different. And he's like, no. But he's very nice to her today, asking her questions. And this is the scene that compares the movie where they're looking at the cells on the microscope and having to write what phase they're in. And of course, Edward knows all of them. He's done it before, but she also knows all of it. And like one thing I want to like bring to attention is Bella seems to be genuinely very, very intelligent. She reads like classic novels. She seems to be ahead of everybody else in her class. And what we know essentially happens to her is following like the Mormon influence within the books. She is so super intelligent and gets married and has kids, and that's kind of like what we know about her. And I don't, and that's who she becomes. Does Bella the vampire have a career, or is she also doomed to just return to high school forever, or is she like barred against that because she has a kid now? I don't know how that works, but that's just something I was thinking about the other day, that it feels like sucky that Bella is so smart and is ahead of all of her classmates, and then she just ends up being Edward's baby mama. I don't know. Like, pour one out for Bella. While they're sitting there going through everything, they start having small talk, and he's like, oh, I think everyone knows your name. The whole town's been waiting for you to arrive. And she's like, it specifically says, I grimaced. I knew it was something like that. And I brought this up in the last one, like, do you guys think that it's been like the talk of the town? They're like, oh yeah, police chief Charlie, remember when like his erotic wife like ran away and took their daughter, and her daughter would come sometimes in the summer times? Like, it's such a small town, I'm sure people are very aware of her already, even if she's not there all the time. And it seems like, once again, like her name and Charlie being her dad kind of precedes her for good or bad. There's a point where they're passing the microscope back and forth, and it says, "When he touched me, it stung my hand as though an electric current had passed through us." And I know a lot within the books, we talk a lot about fate and potentially that being like Bella being fated to be a vampire from the beginning. Do you think that has something to do with that? It's kind of like in the Hotel Transylvania movies, where I don't remember what they call it, but when they fall in love, they get the zing, I think is what they say. Is that kind of what it is here? It's like kind of like a fated romance thing, or is she just kind of like has a crush on him and it gave her butterflies? I can't really tell. And they finish their assignment, obviously, before anyone else does. And they're having small talk, and Edward's kind of shady because she talks about Phil and talks about her mom, and he's like, he plays ball for a living. And Edward's like, have I heard of him? And she goes, probably not. He doesn't play well, strictly minor league. He moves around a lot. And he finds that funny, it seems. Like there's multiple points where it talks about how he chuckles. He's like, would I know them? Like, okay. Like he is like, you can tell, I think Edward, and I've heard this in Midnight Sun, and I can't wait to get to Midnight Sun. I've never read it. Edward hates Renee. And I don't blame him. I'm not a Renee fan either. If Renee has one hater, it's me. If Renee has zero haters, zero haters, then I have died. And then he keeps asking her a question. He's like, am I annoying you? And she's like, no. And she's like, I don't know. Most people just find me super easy to read. My mom always says that I'm just like her open book. And I highlighted this because obviously it's pertinent to Edward and Edward's powers. He says, on the contrary, I find you very difficult to read. Despite everything that I'd said and he'd guessed, he sounded like he meant it. You must be a good reader then, I replied. Usually. He smiled widely, flashing a set of perfect ultra white teeth. And we're going to get into, I have the illustrated guide right here. Well, they kind of go into more like the vampire transformation. And I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, do you get like veneer teeth? Like I have missing teeth. I think they grow back, but I just have like perfect veneer teeth. What would happen to my bunny teeth? I have a lot of questions for what would happen to my teeth as a vampire. But the entire time she makes note that he's like gripping the table the entire time with an unmistakable tension, she states. So he's like asking her questions, gripping the table, but as soon as the bell rings, once again, he's like, okay, bye. He's like one of those kids, he's like pre-packs all of his stuff and bounces. He is that kind of guy, and she is amazed. She's like, wow, he's gone again. Interesting. And just like clockwork, Mike skips towards her, and she says it was just like he had a wagging tail to walk her out of class. So Mike was kind of shit talking Edward that first day of school, and then he kind of returns back to that and he goes, Cullen seemed friendly enough today, he commented as we shrugged into our raincoats. He didn't seem pleased about it. So he's not happy that apparently hot Edward Cullen is coming in and being nice to Bella. No, 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 no. He would rather that boy be mean to her so he has a better chance. And I think that says a lot about Mike. Mike, Haters Club, number one. I want to read a portion of the ending paragraph. I swiftly looked away and threw the truck into reverse, almost hitting a rusty Toyota Corolla in my haste. Lucky for the Toyota, I stomped on the brake in time. It was just the sort of car that my truck would make scrap metal of. I took a deep breath, still looking at the other side of my car, and cautiously pulled out again, with greater success. I stared straight ahead as I passed the Volvo. But from a peripheral peek, I swear I saw him laughing. So again, her thoughts, even after she just about ran into a car, is about Edward. And also, I want to talk about something so, so silly. I remember when I was like a kid, my grandma one time like asks me, she's like, what kind of car do you want when you get older? And I've always wanted a Volkswagen Bug. That's always been what I wanted. And I think she was like looking for the answer. She was like trying to like confirm like a gift or something. I can't really remember, but I remember I go, a Volvo. And she's like, a Volvo? I'm like, yeah, a Volvo. And she's like, okay, I guess they are kind of interesting. No, they're not. Have you seen Volvos? They're so boring. Why did she assign him to drive that? I mean, it, I feel like there's a lot of cars that you could like give to him that, because to me she was trying to give everybody has a car that's kind of like their personality. Like Emmett has his Jeep, but like I feel like there's a lot of other cars that would like give cool and mystique and like luxury without being like a Volvo. Like how random. And I have several questions. They're rich, obviously, but is there a Volvo dealership in town, or do they have to go out of town to get them? Are they shipped to them? How did they get the Volvo? Why that? Like, he had to have specifically picked out. There's no way that there's a Volvo dealership in Forks. So he had to go somewhere else to get the Volvo. And I have a weird car. I have a Fiat, and maybe you're like, that's not a weird car. And I didn't think it was a weird car. Like, I knew it was an Italian make car, but I didn't really think that made it weird. There's some oil change places that like won't work on my car, and a lot of the work that like if I ever had to have something done in my engine, I would have to go to a Fiat. I would have to go to a Fiat dealership to have that worked on. And there's not that many, and usually they're like grouped in. It's like Jeep, something, something, and Fiat. And so that's where I have, and there's like one. There's like one in my entire area without driving hours and hours and hours away. And this one is like an hour and a half away. So there's like one place I can get everything serviced on my Fiat. But none of the local places will even do a
Oil.
change on my poor Fiat. My poor Fiat is broken down in the garage. One day I'll have it up and running. One day I'm going to have it up and running. We're going to be driving. That's going to be a whole era. I'm going to take you guys with me. We're going to blog all of it. It's going to be so exciting because I haven't driven full time in years. But yeah, my Fiat has all of these issues, and I have such a hard time finding places to go get it dealt with. Do Volvos have the same issue? I imagine, or is like, could they take the Volvo to the like the Jiffy Lube and get everything done, or do they have to go to the special Volvo warehouse? I don't know. I relate. Like I said, I have a Fiat, which is a much less nice car. Almost paid off though. Doesn't run right now, but it's the battery. But then it needs everything swapped out because it hasn't ran. You guys know, cars are so much work. Cars are so much work. But why a Volvo? To return back to what I originally wanted to talk about, why a Volvo? Has anyone ever looked at a Volvo? Has I'm not even gonna say. Has anyone ever looked at a Volvo and been like, I would think that is the car of a super stylish, super cool man? I don't know. No, I wouldn't think that. If I didn't know better, I would think that Volvo paid Stephanie Meyer for it. And I know, like, for the movie, because he has a Volvo, I think in the movie, like, they would have probably had to go to Volvo and be like, can Edward drive your car? It's kind of like everything that has like an Apple iconography in the background they're using in TV shows that has to be approved. Does that have to be approved? I have a lot of questions. I always wonder that when like things are written in, it seems like you're not allowed to, and that's why some sets have like fake food or fake brands. I don't know. There's so many things. There's so many things. So many things. Big rant. But yeah, that less things happened in the second chapter. The next chapter that we are going to read is going to be called Phenomenon. Phenomenon. And so I will get to that as soon as I can. The weekend is starting, and I typically don't film content during the weekend, but I'm going to read it over the weekend, have everything ready, and then have it up to you for you guys ASAP. Trying to get my Service Dog podcast out first because I don't want to let that podcast, you know, like that meme where it's like they're grabbing like the little girl and she's like under the water, and then like there's like the skeleton. I don't want my Service Dog podcast to be the little skeleton at the bottom and me to be like gleefully picking up my Twilight podcast. But yeah, I will see you guys as soon as possible for chapter 3, Phenomenon. We're going to keep delving into this. We're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about just different things. Also, what movie was I watching yesterday? Breaking Dawn Part 1. And Carlisle has like a cross in his house, like kind of by the staircase. Maybe that's not what it is. And when we get to the movies, I really bad want to talk about it, but it's not helping the theory that has been told to me and that I cannot now unsee as an ex Mormon that Carlisle is supposed to be Joseph Smith, a stand in for Joseph Smith within the story. I was like, what? And I mean, Mormons, the LDS church, they don't do crosses, but why did he have that piece of decor in his house? Is it like for funny, like because vampires are typically repelled by crosses? But I did note that in the movie, and I wanted to touch on that. I'm probably going to watch those movies an unreal amount of times so I can also be ready for the movie portion of the podcast. But I reread every chapter 3 times when making these videos so I can kind of know what I'm talking about. This is the first time I'm reading these in over a decade, and the first time that I am looking at it with like a fully formed cortex. And I'm excited to continue with you guys. I'm ranting. I hope this episode wasn't too ranty, and I appreciate everybody checking out the new podcast. Is something that's completely different than anything else that I do. I'm wearing another Twilight shirt today. Yes, I wear Twilight earrings. If you are a audio listener, I have Twilight earrings that say "As if you could outrun me," and it has Edward running. And then I'm wearing it with just like a classic Twilight shirt. Ooh, Bella looks silly, but I got this just at Target. This one, I love that they're making modern Twilight shirts, but sometimes I'll see people post them, and then I'll go to Target and I can't find them. But I did find this one, and me and my husband have matching ones, and so I think he wore mine and kind of like wore it out. But it's comfortable, it's cute. I collect Twilight shirts. Twilight shirt tour soon. Anyway, I will talk to you guys next time.